Grampy Rabbit's Hovercraft. Grandpa Pig is taking Peppa and George out for the first time on his sailing boat. "Hello, old bean," says Mr. Stallion. "Grandpa, that man just called you an old bean," cries Peppa. "It's another way of saying old friend," says Grandpa Pig. "Now, where did I leave my boat?" says Grandpa Pig. "What does your boat look like, Grandpa?" asks Peppa. "It has a little red flag on top of the mast," says Grandpa Pig. "Like that little flag?" asks Peppa. "Oh dear, Grandpa Pig's sailing boat has sunk." Here is Grampy Rabbit on his hovercraft. Grampy Rabbit zooms past the boats. "What is that monstrosity?" asks Mr. Stallion. "Is it allowed at the sailing club?" asks Mrs. Corgi. Grampy Rabbit reaches Peppa and George. "Hello," shouts Grampy Rabbit. "What a marvellous day for sailing." "Hello, Grampy Rabbit," says Peppa. "Grandpa Pig, you look sad," says Grampy Rabbit. "What's the matter?" "We can't go sailing because our boat has sunk," says Peppa. "Why don't you hop onto my hovercraft?" suggests Grampy Rabbit. "You can't drive that thing around here," says Grandpa Pig. "You're not a member of the sailing club." "Well, you're a member, aren't you?" replies Grampy Rabbit, "so I'm sure it'll be perfectly fine." Peppa, George and Grandpa Pig board Grampy Rabbit's hovercraft. "Hold on to your hats," shouts Grampy Rabbit as they zoom across the sea. Grampy Rabbit's hovercraft can go on land and water. Mr. Stallion and Mrs. Corgi are enjoying a peaceful day sailing. "Oh, what's that horrible noise?" cries Mrs. Corgi. "It's that monstrosity again," says Mr. Stallion. "Whoopsie, ha-ha," says Grampy Rabbit. Grampy Rabbit stops off at the sailing club's cafe to get some juice. "This is the life, eh?" says Grampy Rabbit. "The sea and the sky and the boats sailing by." "But the boats are not sailing by, Grampy Rabbit," says Peppa. "There's no wind," says Grandpa Pig. "Without wind, sailing boats can't sail." Suddenly they hear voices calling for help. "It's Mr. Stallion and Mrs. Corgi. We need to rescue them, Grampy Rabbit," says Peppa. Grampy Rabbit zooms towards the shouting. "Ahoy there," he calls. "We can't get back to the dock without the wind," says Mrs. Corgi. "Toss me a line and I'll tow you back in," says Grampy Rabbit. Grampy Rabbit's hovercraft tows the sailing boats back to the shore. "We're towing the boats to shore, we're towing the boats to shore," sings Grampy Rabbit. "We're towing the boats to the car park, towing the boats to be parked," sings Grampy Rabbit. "Now you don't have so far to walk to your cars." "But sailing boats don't go on land like hovercrafts," asks Grandpa Pig. "Grandpa Pig, who is your friend?" asks Mr. Stallion. "We must thank him for rescuing us." "His name is Grampy Rabbit," replies Grandpa Pig. "Grampy Rabbit, delighted to meet you, old bean," says Mr. Stallion. "You too, old bean," replies Grampy Rabbit.